Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. Before we enter into the world of plaint, trial, judicial proceeding, there is a very important aspect of the judicial process which we are going to discuss today, and that is the fees for accessing the justice. Today, we are going to discuss the Court Fees Act 1870, which govern that if a person he has to file a plaint, appeal, writ, or any application, one has to be pay fees for that. Yes, the Court Fees Act 1870 deal with this aspect of the judicial process. So let us begin. So topic which we are going to cover today, we'll discuss the introduction of this act and what are the objectives of the act. We'll see the structure of the act. Then we'll discuss gradually chapters, chapter 1, 2, 3, 3A, 4, 5 and 6. Now let us begin the introduction of the Court Fees Act 1870. The Court Fees Act 1870 is fiscal and it is procedural structure which enacted by the Britisher colonial period here to levy fees on the courts and official proceedings. The purpose was both administrative and generating revenue, and this role is played by this act that time, and even the dual role is played by this act in today's time also. This act laid down that what amount has to be paid on fees as a fees. This act mentioned that on which document one has to be paid fees, and this act also mentioned that how much fees one has to be paid. So what is the fees, on which document the fees has to be paid, and how the fees can be calculated. All these aspects are discussed in the Court Fees Act of 1870. Now, what are the objectives of this act? When we discuss the objective of this act, first of all, the court system requires some substantial financial resource for its functioning. So this act ensures that litigant contribute to the expenses by paying prescribed fees while they are initiating or while they are participating in any legal proceedings. So this fees forms a part of state consolidated fund. So when these fees become a part of consolidated fund, and then further this fees is used for the purpose of infrastructure, administration and for services of the court. Now, by imposing a cost on litigation, this act basically discourages the vexatious litigation, frivolous and speculative litigation by the person. So this act is basically considered as a gatekeeping mechanism because it ensures the party who is actually aggrieved by any violation of a law, they should only approach to the court to get justice and initiate the litigation in respect of that particular violation of their right or any other aspect. So that's why this act helped to reduce the burden of the judiciary, and it also helped to allow the quicker redressal of the legislative grievances. Now, I also want to share some important points here in respect to this act, that one need to be understand that Court Fees Act is a purely procedural in nature. This is not substantive law. Why so? Because it does not create or extinguish any legal right. So what is the purpose of this act? It merely regulates the filing and progression of the legal document in the court of law through the fees which is paid by the person. Now, let us take one example to understand these points. For example, this A, he has a right to claim rupees 5 lakh from Mr. B. And this right itself arises from a substantive law like a contract. So there might be a contract between A and B, and as per that contract, then the B has to be paid rupees 5 lakh to A, but he has not paid that after so many requests or reminder from the side of A. And now A decide to go to court and recover the money which he is supposed to be get from the B. Now what happened? This A, he files a civil suit. Now when he files a civil suit to claim rupees 5 lakh, he must pay the court fees as per the Court Fees Act. And if the fees is not paid, then the court may refuse to entertain the suit as per Section 4. But it doesn't mean that A's legal right to claim the rupees 5 lakh, to claim his money back, is not exist. It exists, but yes, the non-payment of court fee does not nullify the legal right. It only affects the procedural admissibility of the case. So if he has not paid the court fees which he is supposed to be paid, then no further proceeding or hearing will have to be happen in that court. Now see, this complete act is divided into 6 chapters: the preliminary, fees on the document in High Court, fees in the other courts and public offices, process fees of the modes of levying, and miscellaneous. So basically there are 6 chapters, 3 schedules. Schedule 1 deal with the provisions regarding the ad valorem fees. This is very important. And then Schedule 2 contain the fixed fees, and Schedule 3 has the different forms. You can see on the back side of your BEREC, you will get the Schedule 1, 2 and Schedule 3. Let us begin with the discussion on what is their Section 1. Section 1 basically give you the idea of what is the title of the act. So we know the title of the act is the Court Fees Act. Now, what is the jurisdiction of this act, where it extend, and then when this act enacted, commencement of the act. So title, as I said, this act may be called the Court Fees Act of 1870. So far the extent of the act is concerned, where it extend, this extend to the whole of India except the territories which immediately before 1st of November 1956 were comprised in Part B state. So we already discussed about these states. These were the princely state, and as per the section, now it extend to whole of the India except the former Part B state, if they as they existed before November 1st, 1956. However, over the time, many of the states, they have either adopted the act, or they amended the act, or they repealed the act and introduced their own Court Fees Act in their respective states. Now, a small reminder, so far the Part B states are concerned, as per the Constitution of India, these states include the princely state like Hyderabad, Jammu Kashmir, Madhya Bharat, Mysore, Patiala, and East Punjab State Union, we call this PEPSU, and Rajasthan, Saurashtra, etc. So when this act commence, it come into force on 1st day of April. So 1st April 1870, this act is come into force. Now, some state still apply the act. As I said that this act continuously playing the dual role, administrative and revenue generating purpose. So few of the state, Delhi, Punjab, they apply this act with certain amendments. Other states like Tamil Nadu, like Kerala and Karnataka, they have enacted their separate laws on levying court fees. In Tamil Nadu, they have the Tamil Nadu Court Fees and Suit Valuation Act of 1955. So is with the Kerala, they have the Kerala Court Fees and Suit Valuation Act of 1959, and Karnataka has the Karnataka Court Fees and Suit Valuation Act of 1958. State amendments and independent acts, so far this particular discussion is concerned. Constitution of India allow all the states either to amend or to repeal the central acts, fiscal law like the Court Fees Act, and under state list, entry 3, list 2, under 7th schedule. So as a result, many states, they have their amended, they have either amended the Court Fees Act 1870, few of them they repealed it, and few of them they have their own State Courts Act. I just give you the name of 3 states, they have their own Court Fees and Suit Valuation Act. Let us understand in section 1A, what is the meaning of appropriate government? What is the meaning of appropriate government? See, in relation to fee or stamp relating to document which is presented or to be presented before any officer serving under the central government, the government and relation to any other fees or stamp, the state government. See, for the matter of under union jurisdiction, the central government is empowered to levy particular fees. That is in the Supreme Court of India. Then it is the appropriate government. And when we discuss the matter, they are under the state jurisdiction. In that point of a time, in all civil courts or revenue courts under the control of the state government, the state become the appropriate government for levying or modifying the court fees, and hence fee in the Supreme Court, central government, we can see that in the union list, and the fee under the state and the fee in all other court under the state government, that is there in the state list. Now let us begin with the chapter 2, fee in the high courts and in the courts of small causes at the presidency towns. Section 3 discuss how the fee levy in high court on their original site. Now this is important, on their original site. As per the language of section 3, the fee payable for the time being to the clerks and officers of high court other than those of Kerala, Mysore and Rajasthan are chargeable in each of such court under number 11 of the first and number 7, 12, 14, 20 and 21 of the second schedule in this list annexed, and the fee for the time being chargeable in the court of small causes at the presidency town and their several offices shall be collected in manner hereinafter appearing. Shall be collected in the manner hereinafter appearing. Now let me explain you with the help of this case law that state of Maharashtra and in Mishri Lal Tarachand Lodha's case, Honorable Court clarified that section 3 mandates fee collection from high court officers for services rendered in connection with non-judicial or procedural aspect of the court functioning. So, section 3 basically regulate the administrative charges in the high court. Moving further, this is an important section we have in Court Fees Act, section 4, and section 4 deal with the fee on documents filed etc. in high court in their extraordinary jurisdiction. So, we have to keep in mind that here we are talking about the fee on document in high court and the court is acting in the extraordinary jurisdiction. When you give a reading to this section in your Bear Act, you will see that this section provides that when a document is filed in a high court, document is filed in the high court and high court is acting in its extraordinary civil jurisdiction, original civil jurisdiction. So, document is filed in the high court is acting or exercising its extraordinary original civil jurisdiction, then a court fees is payable, and if the document were filed in a suit before the same high court under its ordinary original jurisdiction, mean if the person is filing document in the high court while the high court is exercising its extraordinary original civil jurisdiction, then the court fees will be levied on that document as that this document is originally filed in the high court as its original civil jurisdiction. So, if you file a document in the high court under extraordinary jurisdiction, you have to pay the same court fees as this case was under the high court in its ordinary jurisdiction. Now, in simple word, we can understand that court fees does not change just because you are using the extraordinary power of the high court. So, whatever you would have paid under its regular jurisdiction, that's what you must pay here too when the court is exercising its extraordinary original civil jurisdiction in that particular matter. Again, in the state of Bombay versus Supreme Journal Mills Exchange Limited in 1960, Supreme Court held that court fees must be paid even if the relief is sought through the extraordinary jurisdiction. So this is the landmark judgment of that time, that if the relief has civil consequences or monetary valuation. Now further, we'll take one example to understand section 4. For example, a petitioner filed a writ petition under Article 226 of the Constitution, and he is challenging the government land acquisition order. The petitioner seeks compensation of rupees 50 lakh. The High Court is exercising its extraordinary civil jurisdiction. Now, as per section 4, the court fees the person has to be payable is on rupees 50 lakh, which he is asking as a compensation from the state government because they have given an order of the land acquisition for the same. Now, and you can see here on the screen, fee payable as per section 4, court fee payable, same as if it was a regular civil suit for rupees 50 lakh under High Court's ordinary original civil jurisdiction. Let us see section 5 again. Section 5 is a very important part of the Court Fees Act 1870, and this section particularly deal with if there is any kind of a difference in case of a difference as to necessity or amount of the court fees. So when there is any difference arise between the officer whose duty is to see that whether the fees is paid under this chapter and not, and the suitor, or you can say the attorney, who feel that in that particular matter in the document there is no requirement to pay fee, but the official feel that on that particular document the fees is supposed to be paid. If there is any difference as to the necessity or on the amount of the fee, then section 5 comes into picture. Let us give a reading to this section. When any difference arises between the officer whose duty is to see that any fees is paid under this chapter and any suitor, attorney, as to the necessity of paying a fee or the amount thereof, the question shall, when the difference arises in any of the said High Court, be referred to the existing taxing officer. So if the matter is, if this difference of opinion is in High Court, where the matter will go, this matter will be referred to the taxing officer. This matter will go to the taxing officer, and the decision of the taxing officer will be final in this aspect. But if the taxing officer feel that the question is of a general importance, then he refer this matter to the Chief Justice of such High Court or to any judge who has been appointed for this matter by the Chief Justice of the court. Now, when the same difference arises in any of the said court of small causes, when this matter is in the court of small causes, then this question will be referred to the clerk of that court, and the decision of the clerk of that court will be considered as a final decision. But if the clerk is of the opinion that this question is of the general importance, then he referred this matter, this question to the judge first class, and then the judge the first class judge decide this matter, and the decision of the first class judge will be considered as the final decision in this matter. So the Chief Justice shall declare who shall be the taxing officer. Now he will declare within the meaning of first paragraph of this section that who will be the taxing officer, who will decide. The Chief Justice, he will declare this. So in High Court, if there is difference of opinion, there is taxing officer, and taxing officer's decision was final if there is no any question which is of the general importance. If the matter is in the court of small causes matter, it will be referred to a clerk. His decision will be final. But if he feel that the question is of a general importance, in which he shall refer it to the for the opinion of the first class judge, and then the decision of the first class judge will be final. Now, because this section is really very important, because in this section we deal the two courts in hierarchy, the high courts and then the courts of the small causes. So let us understand this with this explanation. Now this section outline the procedure. The procedure when there is any kind of a dispute. Now this dispute is regarding, as the title of this act said, whether the court fees is required, means whether the court fees is important, it is necessity there or not. Or if it is necessity, then how much the court fees should be, how much the court fee should be, what should be the amount of the court fees. So this section basically cover disputes. If this dispute arise in the high court or dispute arise in the court of small causes. So in this slide, we understand that this section discuss procedure. Procedure is about the court fees, whether the court fees is required, whether there is a necessity of the court fees, and if there is a necessity of the court fees, what should be the amount of the court fees. After this, we'll discuss, this section deal with that this matter comes, this dispute comes where? The dispute either arise in the high court or dispute arise in the court of small causes. And then if there is a difference of opinion, then we'll see the officer responsible for verifying the payment of the court fee, that is sometime registrar, reader or clerk. We just discussed that the Chief Justice will declare that who will be the taxing officer. So normally you see the officer who is responsible for verifying the payment of a court fees is registry or reader or the clerk of the court. And then the parties involved, the dispute is between this officer and the suitor of or his advocate. Now regarding whether a document require court fees or whether what should be the amount of the court fees, the court fees has been paid. So procedure high court, first authority is a taxing officer, and if the question is of a common cause, then he will refer the matter to the Chief Justice. So decision of the taxing officer will remain final unless the matter is of a general importance. So he refer the question to the Chief Justice and or the judge who is nominated by the Chief Justice for the final decision. Now, as already discussed, I'm just giving you the simple explanation of this part 2 of section 5. Dispute arise in the court of small causes. It is referred to the clerk of the court. The court's clerk's decision is a final. If he feel that this question is of a general cause, he refer this matter to the judge first class, and the decision of the judge first class will be remain final in this aspect. So this is section 5. Now we have the State of Bombay Super General Films Exchange Limited. I already discussed this case. Now again in this particular section we can see the Supreme Court emphasized that the levy of court fees is mandatory and that compliance must be ensured. Compliance of this must be ensured, but through the procedural safeguard which are laid down and including section 5. Let us take one or two examples just to understand the provision which we discussed. Imagine that a party file a writ petition seeking the quashing of a government order. Party file a writ petition and party is requesting, praying to quash the government order. Registry staff say that you have to pay a 1,000 fee for that. Petitioner claim, because this is a writ petition under Article 226 of the Constitution, and because this is a writ petition and that's why it is exempted from the ad valorem fee. Now the taxing officer will decide this matter. This is so there is a disagreement on the court fees. The party said that I have filed this under the Article 226. I am exempted from paying the ad valorem fees, but the registry staff said you have to pay 1,000 rupees here. Now decision of the taxing officer will be final here. So who will decide the matter? The taxing officer will decide the matter, and if this issue affect any other similar petition, then taxing officer may refer this matter to the Chief Justice for authoritative resolution. Now section 6, it deal with the fees on documents filed etc. in Mufsil Court or in the public offices. This is a part of chapter 3, and chapter 3 deal with fees in other courts and in public offices. Fees in other courts and public offices. Now our whole discussion will be on the fees in the other courts and in other public offices. See, what is section 6 discuss about? It is fee on document filed, etc. in Mufsil courts or in the public offices. And the provision of section 6 said, except in the courts herein before mentioned, no document of any of the kind specified as chargeable in the first or second schedule of the act annexed shall be filed, exhibited or recorded in any court of justice, or shall be received or furnished by any public officer, unless in respect of such document there be paid a fee on an amount not less than that indicated by either of the proper fee for such document. So the provision is section 6. This need to be break down into parts, and let us understand. Let us see the interpretation of section 6. Except for the High Court, we previously mentioned, right? Except for the High Court, no document of the type which is listed. So you have the first and second schedule on the back of your BEAR Act. Please go through the first and second schedule. The section 6 said, no document of the type, any document which is listed in schedule 2, schedule 1 shall be filed, exhibited, recorded in any court of justice, or shall be received or furnished by any public officer, unless the proper court fees has not been paid less than the amount which is indicated in the respective schedule. Means the document is only recorded, or it is received, or it is furnished by any public officer if the proper fees which is supposed to be paid to get that document, to exhibit that document, or to file that document is paid by that person or individual. If not, then this will not be provided. Now, section 6 mentioned Mufsil courts. Now we understand that Mufsil courts here means civil and criminal courts. And these civil and criminal courts also include the district courts, civil judge courts, magistrate courts, and revenue court when they are empowered. Revenue courts when they are empowered. And so for the public office word used here in section 6, it includes the registrar, the collectors, the tahsildar, the sub-tahsildar, and copy section, etc. So in nutshell, we can say that section 6 laid down a very strict rule that no document covered under the first and second schedule of the act will be provided until and unless the court fees is paid for the same. So this is about section 6. The case we have on section 6 is Wajid versus Mehboob 1943 or 238. A document presented without the proper court fees is considered not validly filed. Not validly filed. So the court is barred from acting on it unless the deficiency is rectified under the permitted provisions. So if the court fees is not paid, then the document will not be verified. Now see, we discuss section 4, section 6, section 5. Now let us understand intersection section 4 versus section 6. If you see section 4, we discussed there the extraordinary jurisdiction of the High Court. So far section 6 is concerned, it applied to all other courts or the public offices, and section 5, it resolved the dispute between the parties. Between the party mean between the official and the suitor or the attorney. So section 5, dispute resolution. So if there is a dispute about the fee payable on a document submitted under section 6, it is resolved under section 5's procedure which is given there. Now let us start our discussion on section 7. Section 7 is a very, very important section of Court Fees Act 1870. When you give a reading to the title of Court Fees Act, section 7 is about computation of fee payable in certain suits. Computation of fees payable in certain suits. Now let us give a reading to this. The amount of fee payable under this act in the suits next hereinafter mentioned shall be computed as follow. Now this section lay down how to calculate the court fees in specific type of civil suit which are listed in the act. Each kind of a suit has a different method of valuation for the purpose of determining the correct court fee. And in this category, the very first come for money. Now see, in the suit for money, including the suit for damages or compensation or arrears of maintenance or of annuities or other sum payable periodically according to the amount claimed. So it means that if there is arrear of maintenance, now there is unpaid maintenance to the wife means and the child. So let it be there was Mr. X, the family court passed an order to pay the 5,000 maintenance per day to the wife and children, but he avoided to pay maintenance to his wife and child. Arrear of maintenance. So computation of fee payable in certain suits, if that is about arrear or if that is about money, we just discussed this is about for money. So in suit for money, here for the arrear of maintenance or for unpaid annuities or for periodic payment, for example unpaid salary or when the pension is not paid, the rule for fee calculation is, now in these circumstances or in these cases, the court fees will be equal to ad valorem, that is the proportionate, that is to the exact amount which is claimed by the plaintiff or which is claimed by the party. Now let us understand this with the help of one more example. For example, if a plaintiff sue for 2 lakh as a damage for the breach of contract, he sued that the party B has breached the contract and he sued to get a damage of 2 lakh rupees. Now the court fees will be calculated on 2 lakh rupees. This is the subject matter and the court fees will be calculated on the subject matter as per the ad valorem rate set in Schedule 1 of the Act by the relevant state amendment. I am sure you understand with the help of this example that for the money, the ad valorem fee rate will be decided as per Schedule 1. Now the second clause, section 7, it discusses about maintenance for maintenance and annuity. So if there is a suit for maintenance and annuity or other sum which payable periodically, then according to the value of the subject matter of the suit, such value shall be deemed to be 10 times. Now we need to keep this thing in mind that if maintenance, annuity, other sum payable periodically, I was talking about maybe it is the pension or maybe the salary, then this value shall be deemed to be 10 times. Value shall be deemed to be 10 times the amount which is claimed to be payable for 1 year. Let me explain you. This clause deal with the recurring or periodic payment and such as monthly or annual maintenance, pension, annuity, and any installment based or continuous payment obligation. In this situation, let us see that what is the provision given here in the Court Fees Act. For calculation rate, the value of the subject matter for fee purpose is calculated as 10 time annual payment, which is 10 time annual payment amount claimed. Let us give a look to this example. A plaintiff claim 5,000 per month as a maintenance. So here is one Mr. A and V is his wife, his husband. Now B, she claimed 5,000 maintenance per month. So what is the annual claim? What they said that for the fee purpose it is calculated. How we calculate the fees? We calculate the fees 10 times into the annual payment. So if she is claiming 5,000 per month, so for the 12 month the amount will be 60,000. And 10 times means now you have to multiply 60,000 with 10, right? So annual claim is 5,000 multiplied by 12, this is 60,000, and court fees will be composed on the 60,000 multiplied by 10. On the total amount, the court fees will be calculated. Now second, for the other movable property having a market value. So this clause 3, it discusses for other movable property having the market value. Now this movable property is having some market value. We have to be keep this thing in our mind that now we are calculating the fees for that property. That property is a movable property, and this movable property has some market value. For example, your second-hand car, when you sell off this car in the market, then that car has some value. The property is movable property, and this property has some value. So see, in suits for movable property other than the money, where the subject matter has a market value, according to such value at the date of presenting the plaint. Explanation of this clause is, this apply when plaintiff seeks the return of movable goods. Now this movable good is not cash, this is already mentioned here, other than the money, and such good have the ascertainable market value. As I already mentioned, for example, any vehicle, any machinery, any gold, silver ornament, stocks, or any other kind of a commodity which is movable in nature. Now see how will we calculate the court fees for that thing. So court fees is payable on the market value of the movable item on the date of filing the suit. So on that particular date, let it be on the 23rd March 2025, what was the market value of that item, that according to that the court fees will be given on that particular suit. So plaintiff must declare this value in the plaint, and the court can require evidence if it is disputed or not. So the two things are important here. When the plaintiff, he declare the value of the plaint, and the second thing, the court has to be assured and require evidence that whether this movable property is disputable property or not. For example, suit for return of a gold ring worth of 80,000. At the time of filing the court fee is payable on the 80,000 rupees. Moving further, Section 7 provide a categorical clause-wise formulas for court fees, which is computation, which is formula for the court fee computation based on the nature of the claim. So clause 1 to 3 we just discussed. For the suit for money, calculated on the amount claim, recurring payment 10 times the annual value, and movable with the market value as on the date of the suit, whatever the value was, according to that the court fees has to be paid. Now we come on this clause 4, in suit for movable property of no market value. So what we discussed earlier, suit for movable property, but that movable property has some market value. Now this clause talk about in suit for movable property, the property is movable, but that property has no market value as such. Now see, for movable property where the subject matter has no market value, subject matter has no market value. As for the instance, in case of the document relating to the title, the plaintiff shall state the amount at which the value the relief he sought. So there are movable items which has no market value. I mean, you cannot determine the price of that particular item. Or for example, a person file a suit to recover the ancestral family documents like the property deeds or a family painting or religious idols, etc. The court fees is calculated as per the value which is assigned for this particular item by the plaintiff. So otherwise the market value of this the religious idols or the family painting, there is no market value of such items. So that's why the provision said the court fees is calculated as per the value which is assigned by the plaintiff. Now as per this section 7 clause 4 subclause A, these are personal or unique movable items. One word mentioned here, they are personal and they are unique movable items that cannot be valued commercially, or they have no established resale market. So yet they hold, the legal or maybe emotional or maybe any religious or any kind of a symbolic importance for the plaintiff. That's why he is approaching in the court to get these items, movable items, back from the other person. Now, here, to enforce a right to share in joint family property. So, this subclause B of clause 4, to enforce a right to share in any property on the ground that it is the joint family property, the plaintiff shall state the amount at which he values the relief sought. For example, there is a Hindu undivided families. There is a Hindu undivided family, and in this Hindu undivided family, Mr. A is having his share with B, C, D and E. So they are the 5 shareholders in that common property. So as per the rule, in this common joint family property, Mr. A, he is having 1/5 share in this property. Now let us understand this with the explanation and then with the example. The plaintiff claim a right to partition or share in joint property. When he claims share in joint family property, or he is asking to get share through the partition, because the entire property is not being transferred and the share is disputed or undefined, an exact valuation may not be possible. It is not possible to assess that what is the exact value of the that property. So the court fees is payable in this case on the value of relief as assessed by the plaintiff. Let us see that if the plaintiff claim 1/5 share in a house, this A, he claim 1/5 share in the house, but it does not seek possession or partition of the entire house. He is only asking that he is claiming that I have a 1/6 share in this property. So this property belongs to our ancestor, my father and my brother, Mr. B. He has not done anything, or he has not constructed this property, and I have the share in this property. So here plaintiff is claiming 1/5 share in the house, but does not seek possession or partition in the entire house. Now this 1/5 value of the relief is considered only. So if we imagine that the value of this property is 1 crore and Mr. A is asking for the 1/5 share, so his share is 20 lakh rupees. Okay, so plaintiff is claim share 1/5 and 1/5 is equal to 20 lakh rupees. However, the plaintiff only seek a declaration that he has 1/5 share in this joint family property. He is not asking for possession, and that's why the court fees is payable on 20 lakh rupees or on the amount that plaintiff value in the relief, and it should not be on 1 crore rupees. We have a case of SRM Arumugam versus SRM Ramaswamy. In this case, co-partner sue for a declaration of share in joint family without seeking division or possession. So the plaintiff valuation is acceptable and the court fees is payable on that value only. Now clause C, it discusses about for a declaratory decree and consequential relief. To obtain a declaratory decree or order when consequential relief is paid, the plaintiff shall state the amount at which he value the relief sought. Now this is important here, that it is the plaintiff, he shall mention, he shall tell that at which amount he value the relief he sought. Now see, this is a purely declaratory suit. For example, declaring a document null and void without consequential relief may attract a fixed fee under section 17 clause 3 of the schedule 2. But once the plaintiff seek consequential relief also, like possession or injunction or cancellation, etc., then it becomes the composite suit. It becomes the composite suit, and section 7 clause 4 subclause C will be applied here, because this clause C is talking about declaratory decree and consequential relief. So this plus this. Now let us see here, this plaintiff filed a suit for declaration that a sale deed dated 2021 is void ab initio. So His only motive is to declare that suit is void ab initio. And further, he also mentioned recovery of possession for property from the purchaser. Now, he is requesting, he is praying declaration that the sale deed of 2021 is void ab initio, and he is asking for the recovery of possession of property from the purchaser. The market value of this property which he mentioned is of 50 lakh rupees. Market value of property is 50 lakh. But plaintiff states that value of relief he sought is 20 lakh rupees. So plaintiff must state in the plaint how they value combined relief. So declaration plus possession come into picture. But when a suit only seek both declaration and possession, it cannot be treated as a purely declaratory suit. It attract an ad valorem fee based on the plaintiff's valuation, but the valuation must be fair and must be reasonable and genuine. Now next is for an injunction. D. This is to obtain an injunction. Now it applies to temporary or permanent injunction. So maybe the suit is either to the temporary or to the permanent injunction. Now to restrain, for example, the encroachment, or to stop the construction, or to prevent a breach of contract, this subclause D come into picture. For example, a person seeks an injunction to restrain a neighbor from blocking access to his road. So they might be sharing the common path, and Mr. B, he start a construction on some area of the common path, and that's why the Mr. A, he is seeking an injunction to restrain Mr. B to construct on that particular area or path. So the court fees will be computed based on the value that plaintiff attached to that relief. Now it depends that what is the value the plaintiff attached to the relief. Next is for easements. Now this E deal with for a right to someone's benefit, not herein otherwise provided for, to arise out of land. And for this, now this suit pertain to right like a right to way, a right to drain water, a right to light, or right to air. Secondly, these rights arise out of land but are not ownership right. These are only arises out of the land. Now let us understand this for easement, the suit for easement, and how the suit for easement, what will be the court fees for the suit of easement. This example help us to understand that the plaintiff files a suit to assert a right of way over a neighbor's land, because his house is adjoining to the house of Mr. B, and to get a path he has to be go through that particular portion of B's property, and he file a suit to assert that he has a right of way over the neighbor's land. Again, the fees is calculated as per the plaintiff's valuation of the relief. So this will depend that how the plaintiff evaluate that what is the valuation of that relief he is asking for. Next, F deal with for accounts. For accounts. Now for accounts, according to the amount at which the relief sought is valued in the plaint or memorandum of appeal. So in all suits, the plaintiff shall state the amount at which he value the relief he sought for. Now these suits for accounts, it include the suits like the partnership accounting, the joint venture profit, the sharing, the principal agent relationship audit, etc. Now since the exact amount due to uncertain until books are examined, the court fees is calculated on a reasonable estimate or value stated in the plaint. Let us understand this with the help of this example on the screen. Here a person claims 50,000 may be due from a dissolved firm. The plaintiff state this valuation in the plaint and pay the court fees accordingly. Now he has to be pay court fees. The claim he is asking here, that is a 50,000. Next, for the possession of land, house and garden, this is the para 5. Again, this is a very important in section 7. It discusses in suit for the possession of land, houses, gardens according to the value of the subject matter, and such value shall deem to be where the subject matter is land. Now, where the subject matter is land, and where the land forms the entire estate or definite share of an estate paying annual revenue to the government, or it forms part of such estate and is recorded in the collector's registers as a separate assessed with such revenue, and such revenue is permanently settled in 10 times. We need to understand this. Such revenue is permanently settled 10 times the revenue so payable. Now take this example. Plaintiff seek possession on a land. This land pay rupees 2,000 as a permanently settled revenue. Now court fees will be 10 times of this 2,000, that is 2,000. Now we multiply this 2,000 with 10, 20,000. It means that the plaintiff has to pay court fees on the 20,000 rupees. Now this clause B said where the land forms an entire estate or a definite share of estate and he is paying annual revenue to the government, or it is form a part of estate and recorded as aforesaid, such revenue is settled but not permanently. So revenue is settled here, but it is not permanently. If you compare this with A, here the revenue is paying revenue to the government and this revenue is permanently settled. If permanently settled, that time it was 10 times. Now this is not permanently settled, then it is 5 times the revenue so payable. Now this is a kind of temporary settlement. This is temporary settlement, means revenue is not fixed forever, but it is maybe periodically, it may be revised, so it may be settled for 5 years, maybe for 2 years or 3 years, or maybe it revised after 5 years or 10 years periodically. Now where the land pay no such revenue or has been partially exempted from such payment. So earlier we discussed the land which pay permanently revenue, which pay not permanent revenue. Now here the land, it is not pay any revenue or has partially exempted from such payment or is charged with any fixed payment in lieu of such revenue, and net profit has arisen from the land during the next year before the date of presenting the plaint, 15 times of such net profits. But where no such net profit has arisen, that from the amount at which the court shall estimate the land with reference to the value of similar land in the neighborhood. So court will try to assess the value of the land in the neighborhood, that land which is in the question, and accordingly the court fees will be decided. Now this clause applied to the suits for possession of non-revenue paying land. Let us understand. Where the land pay no land revenue to the government, or it pay the partial or is partially exempted, or pay a fixed amount instead of annual revenue, or when the land has yielded net profit during the practicing year. So in case the value of subject matter is 15 multiplied by the net profit of the land of the last year. So 15 times to the net profit of the last year. Now the court fees will be estimated on the value which is based of the similar land in the neighborhood. So if no profit is made, then we'll estimate the value as per the value of the land in the neighborhood. Now land with net profit. Land does not pay government revenue, exempt agriculture land, net income cultivation 10,000 in the previous year, 10,000 multiplied by 15. So this is 15 times 10,000. So court fees will be paid on 1,50,000 in this case. Second example is land with no profit. Now this land yielded no net income last year. It's a barren, it's unused land, no agriculture, no cultivation is there. So no land revenue is payable, but similar land in the same area is valued 3 lakhs. So court will estimate the value, this is 3 lakh, and the court fees will be paid on the same market value. Now, when the land forms part of estate paying revenue to the government but is not a definite share of such estate and is not separately assessed as above the market value of the land is, in such case no official revenue figure is available and the market value becomes only fair basis for determining the court fees. So we have one example where the plaintiff seek possession of a piece of land carved out of a large joint estate. Land is not yet divided. No partition take place. No separate entered into the revenue record. So revenue record means there is no Khata Khatuni number. So the current value of the land is 5 lakh and the court fees payable is on the 5 lakh rupees only. This subclause E talk about for houses and garden. So where the subject matter is house or a garden, according to the market value of that house or of garden, the court fees will be based on the market value of that house and a garden. So if the market value of the house is a 10 lakh rupees, then the court fees will be payable on the 10 lakh rupees only. To enforce a right of preemption, in suit to enforce a right of preemption according to the value of the land, house or garden in respect which the right is claimed. So court fees is calculated as per clause 5 and it depending on whatever is the subject matter means of the land. So what is the value of the land, house or a garden? On the basis of that the court fees will be calculated. So this person filed a suit for to enforce preemption over an agriculture land. The land pays 2,000 rupees annually in permanent revenue. So this is 10 times 20,000. The court fees will be payable on the 20,000. For interest of assignee on land revenue, in suit for the interest of assignee of land revenue, it is 15 times his net profit as such for this year, next before the date of presenting the plaint. Then court fees will be 15 times multiplied by the net value of the assignee for the year. And then to set aside the attachment, the suit to set aside the attachment for the land or an interest of land or revenue according to the amount of which the land or interest was attached. It provided that where such amount exceed the value of the land or interest, the amount of the fee shall be computed as if the suit were for the possession of such land or interest. See, here court fees is equal to amount of attachment. But if the amount of attachment is much more than the actual market value, then the court fees will be as per the possession of that suit under section 7 clause 5. Example 1, land was attached for 5 lakh. Plaintiff filed a suit to set aside the attachment. Court fees will be for the 5 lakh rupees. Example for the proviso, land was attached for 5 lakh. Actual value of the land is 3 lakh. The plaintiff claim unfair overvaluation of the attachment, and in such case, the court may direct that suit be treated as like one for the possession and the court fees will be on 3 lakh rupees and it will not on the 5 lakh rupees. Now to redeem or to foreclose the suits against a mortgage for the recovery of the property, a mortgage, or to foreclose and in suit for mortgagee, to foreclose the mortgage or where the mortgagee is made by conditional sale to have the sale declared absolute. These clauses apply to 3 types of mortgage related suit. Suit for the redemption of mortgagee, suit for the foreclosure and suit for the declaration of sale as an absolute. Now for mortgager, the suit for redemption, the court fees will be paid on the 10 lakh rupees if the mortgager borrow the 10 lakh rupees. For suit for foreclosure, the lender gave 7,50,000 against the house as a mortgage. The borrower default and the court fees will be paid on the 7,50,000 rupees. And thirdly, for conditional sale, if 5 lakh is not repaid by 2 years, then the court fees will be paid on the 5 lakh rupees, that is the loan amount. For specific performance, this clause provides the rule for calculating the fee in the case where a person asks the court to enforce a contract and it is to make the other party perform the promise or as agreed in the contract. So in suit of specific performance or contract of a sale according to the amount of the consideration. So you have this example on your screen. You can see that buyer file a suit to enforce a land sale for agreement 10 lakh, court fees will be on a 10 lakh. Moving further, contract of lease. So contract of a lease, here the fee will be equal to premium or fine plus rent for the first year. So example, 1 lakh rupees is premium plus 1,20,000 rent. The total fees will become 2,20,000. And D for an award according to the amount of valuation of the property in dispute. This is enforcement of award. Now the fees is on value or amount of subject matter which is in the dispute. Now if there is a dispute or between the landlord and tenant, then the suit between the land and tenant, either for the delivery of the tenant for the counterpart of lease to enhance the rent of a tenant, or for the delivery by a landlord of a lease. In these scenario, and for in the subclause CC for the recovery of immovable property from a tenant, including the tenant holding over after the determination of tenancy, to contest a notice of ejectment, to recover the occupancy of immovable property from which the tenant has illegally ejected by the landlord, and between the landlord and tenant for the abatement of rent according to the amount for the rent of the immovable property to which the suit refers, payable for the year next before the date of presenting. You can see rent is 12,000 per month. For 12 months, 1,44,000. Fees is payable on 1,44,000. So we have thoroughly examined in this lecture from the objective of the Court Fees Act from section 1 to section 7 of the Court Fees Act, that how much importance is the court fee for the smooth running and functioning of the judicial process, and how important is to access or to levy fee to manage the infrastructure, the administration and the services in the judicial system. That's all for this lecture, Court Fees Act 1870. In next lecture, we will discuss the section 8 onward. Thank you so very much.